So you're both producers on the film, but obviously producers can do a lot of things and have lots of different roles. So would you mind sharing with everybody, how you got involved with the project, when, and what your role was as a producer on this film?
You start. Elaine, the earliest footage you see in the film is from 2011. Elaine shot it for a different project, but then the project really began in earnest in 2018. And I met Elaine through, we both had grants from Sundance, and we were on a group call, and she mentioned that she was looking for a producer. Diane and I were working on another film together, and I did the slow sell on Diane over the course of a year to get her involved in the project, and then we were off to the races. Yeah, and I think as far as what we did on the project, you can maybe start with that.
I mean, I think when I came in, they had been filming for a couple of years, and then we had finally raised enough money to really schedule and budget and just kind of make the film and have a deadline. And so and then we sort of knew what the ultimate kind of end game was. And so then I came in and we started just putting it all together, and the funeral was one of the last big sort of set pieces that was filmed in West Virginia in 2020, last year. It was a year ago. Yeah, it was a year ago. Yeah, so we filmed that in August, and then we locked the film in early December, and then it premiered at Sundance in January. So, I was present, and that last year was there was a lot of work, but Elaine had an amazing team of people and collaborators in West Virginia, and her partner Curran is the DP on the film, and so they have obviously a shorthand, and they both grew up in West Virginia, so the joke is they've been location scouting for their whole lives. You can tell.
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I think with a film like this, and with a lot of documentary, you have an idea of what the film is going to be. We started this project when I first met Elaine. We had two entirely different worlds that we had names for these worlds. One was called Westelvania, the other was Vandalia. And we had a young girl who was a protagonist who used goggles to see between the worlds. And so the film, we wrote treatments and screenplays, so many different iterations of what the film was. And it just, as it is with documentary, you sort of find it while you're making it, and what the film tells you what it wants to be. And I think it was just a process of working with Elaine and, as Diane said, our incredible team, to understand what the film wanted.
Yeah, at what point was it always that King Cole is the king of this land, and kind of that fairy tale mythology concept was there from the beginning, or was that something that came along the way?
It's been there for 100 years in Appalachia, this notion of King Cole. And I think for us, when we were thinking of how to frame the film, it was always the intention to show that part of the region, of the community, that it is this region that still has a mono economy and a king that dominates or attempts to dominate the identity and the culture, and tries to confine and determine what is and isn't allowed. And so I think that was always something Elaine was very keen on representing in the film. She studied abroad one semester when she was in college, and she got, I think it was in Denmark, and she got there and she said, so what do people, what's the job here, expecting there to just be one economy, that everyone would somehow be related to fishing or something else like this. And when they said you can do all of these different things, it kind of blew her world open.
Yeah.
And I think when she came back to Appalachia, and she's from West Virginia, now lives in Tennessee, it was really important to her to try and portray the possibility of a world that has different inputs and outputs economically and culturally.
Yeah, and I think the approach to the film from the beginning was they were filming all of these Cole rituals, right? These scenes that were grounding the story and grounding just ultimately what this tale was going to be. And I think that was kind of the foundation, and then it was sort of figuring out okay, what is the point of view, who's the point of view. I mean, deeply involved in the narration and trying to understand that, Shane and Elaine and Eva, our amazing editor, We had a writer, Logan Hill. It was just everybody, like every week there was like a different, like, well, maybe it's King Cole's point of view, or maybe it's Tree Fairy. Like, I don't know. Like it was a whole process to kind of finally focus Elaine to, in many ways, her own voice.
Yeah, I mean, what were her and I mean your apprehensions, I guess, about inviting people into this world? Because obviously it's a culture and a region that, you know, people have a lot of preconceived notions about, and especially with like the political climate related to fossil fuels. Like, I imagine there were some worries about, you know, how people were going to come into it and not wanting to kind of confirm stereotypes, or, you know, just being selective about what you showed. I guess I wonder how you all kind of talked about that and figured out how you wanted it to look.
You want to start? Yeah, that was an important consideration for us. You know, a lot of the film, as you see, is from the West Virginia State Archive, and going through that, you see a lot of those like images of people, especially who shot from outside.
Mm-hmm.
You know, reinforcing stereotypes, and I think from the very beginning we knew that's not the movie we want to make. You know, Elaine's past two films were about the opioid epidemic, and that's a extremely important issue, and Elaine's like, her films are the best on that subject, but that doesn't define the region or the people of that region. There's such a larger story to tell, and so from the very beginning, the ambition of this film was to show you know, what is still creating constraints, but also the possibility of imagining another way, and the fact that culture even today isn't monolithic in Appalachia. That was so important. You know, that was Elaine's experience. That was everybody else's experience who was involved in the making of the film, and yet at the same time, unless you sort of honor that culture that you grew up in, the culture of coal, and also allow for it to pass and allow to move on to something else, you're always going to be talking in relation to that experience, as opposed to talking about the relationship between an infinity of other possibilities.
And I think it's a testament to Elaine and you know, the whole team, like most of whom are based in West Virginia. You know, I mean, I think she had fear and apprehension, and she knew, you know, I mean, also the film's called King Cole. So, you know, you're talking to people like, hey, we're making this movie. And they're like, you know, there's definitely, I think, some resistance. And I think she, you know, she also, her family is, you know, family of coal miners. Like, she was terrified of showing her dad the film, right? Like and, you know, but then ultimately, I think when people see it, they really appreciate the truth and the honesty and the nuances of what it is, and about this idea of like, we can't move forward, you know, and imagine a new future if we can't confront and see who we are and where we are, and try to imagine just something different.
And just add one last thing. I think, you know, there's a comfort in reinforcing stories that we already know. And we do seek those stories out, but I think that the challenge and the beauty of making films is actually to try and tell new stories in new ways. And that was our intention in making this film, and that's why the funeral scene that Di was alluding to was so important to us, because that was a documentary scene. Like, we set that funeral up, we had the idea, we invited everyone to participate, but the speeches that emerged and the feeling in that space was real life, and that was a real happening in the region, where and a ritual like the other coal rituals that is going to continue on. You know, there are plans for that to be hopefully to be an annual ritual. Cool. So in the making of the movie, we also sort of, in some ways, did the thing we tried to do with the movie.
What were your own personal, we talked about this a little earlier, like relationships with Appalachia, and I mean, what did you learn about the region and the people through making the film?
Yeah, my roommate in college was from Preston, West Virginia. He walked into the room, and like I as soon as I saw him, I was like, he's from a different place. Like it was not. I grew up in Colorado. It was not. I hadn't met anybody from West Virginia until I was 18. But we became so close. We tried to start a business in West Virginia, so I went there 3 or 4 times, even after college, and it always just struck me that the natural beauty of the place and its placeness also. Like I grew up in suburban Colorado where the onslaught of the sort of like malls and monoculture was really present, and the attempt to sort of disappear a uniqueness of place was like in full steam. But when you went to West Virginia, it was completely resistant to that. Like it was so it had such a strong identity and was clinging to that identity in ways that were both like really beautiful and profound, and also disturbing because it was preventing the evolution of that identity. And so when Elaine told me about this project, it seemed like a really beautiful opportunity to look at a place that can have a really strong identity and see how that can mix with the possibility of an evolution of that identity as opposed to a disappearance of it.
Yeah, well said. I mean, it strikes me that it's clear you guys have spent so much time talking about the concepts in the film, and you both speak about them so beautifully. I wonder, if you can speak about maybe like a memorable challenge while you were making it, and kind of if there was a point at which you were pulling your hair out and not sure what to do next or worried about the future of the film. I'm curious about that too.
We worry about the future of the film.
Yeah,
It's 2023.
Of course.
No, I mean, I think, I think the challenge was like trying to, in making any film and working with any director too, and as a producer, you're always trying to create as much space and opportunity for them to have their creative process, and then for everybody to collaborate into that. And like, Elaine is very good at making space for everybody. And part of that is like, well, how can we create space for her, right?
Yeah.
Because this project was so personal to her, and I think, I come back to the narration, like that was really challenging. And I think once we sort of cracked this idea of maybe it being from a coal miner's daughter point of view, and they started writing, she wound up narrating the scratch track, right? And she was like, I'm not going to be the narrator. It's just not happening. This is too personal. Like it can't be about me. She just like had all these concerns. And when we shot the funeral scene, Hannah, who is the woman who gives that beautiful speech, which she wrote 15 minutes before she walked up the hill, by the way. Like that was not, like that's literally like she showed up. We were like, this is what we're doing. She went away for 15 minutes, wrote that, and then everyone was like bawling at the monitor. And when Heather delivered that, we were like all like, oh my God, she's the narrator. Like, this is amazing. And so, we, right before we were picture locked, she came, we recorded the whole narration with her, and it just, her voice is so melodic, it was almost lulling everyone into like a state. And, we just turned the light, the lights came back on, and Elaine was just like, oh, shit, it's me. Like, it's, and it was her. And it took a while for Elaine to like kind of come to that for herself. So, I mean, that was just like a production challenge. But then, the film premiered at Sundance, and, in any other year, we would, be talking about it differently, like in the sense of like almost nothing got bought at Sundance, almost nothing's got bought all year. We've continued to play festivals. We're going to be part of POV next year, but we're like self-distributing this basically on our own, completely entirely. And that's challenging because like you don't have a lot of money, you don't have a lot of time. Everybody's like, all of a sudden you think when you make these films and they take years, you deliver them to someone, a distributor, and they help support, put them out in the world. And then all of a sudden you're like, I have another full-time job that I'm not getting paid for to have to like sort of do that. Right. But as a filmmaker, that's what you do, right? You do what you need to do, but it's hard, which is why screenings like this, and we've just kind of piecemealed and just keep going. Sorry, I feel like I've rambled.
No, that's great. And I mean, I second all of those challenges. Should I answer this question too? Yeah,
if you'd like to.
I think mine, you can see the pairing of Diane and myself. Like mine is a little bit more abstract. I think the challenge, but we're dealing with a subject that's about like power and relations of power and how they affect the political economy and the creations and how that creates and influences culture. And it's all mixed up with the like environmental, crisis that we're living within, and we're trying to talk to all of that at the same time.
Yeah.
And we're trying to talk to people of Appalachia. We're talking to coal miners, and we're talking to people who've never even thought of a coal mine or thought of the region at the same time, but are also trying to imagine another way for themselves, for their community. And so I think, as it is with all of these films, like trying to tell a really specific, singular story that has universal dimensions was something that we were really focused on all the time. And it applies to Di's comments about just the sort of power brokers, even in documentary film, and like how the culture, how do I say it? How value is determined in terms of a film, in terms of a region, of people, an economy, and really like I think the challenge that we were undertaking the entire time in making the film was sort of like rebelling against that and not accepting. And I think we had just made like two bigger films that were much easier to finance and easier to get out there, and like, but this film just felt so essential and so unusual that we had to make it.
And yet not unusual. Like I always talk about the universal aspects of this film, which is like, I'm not from Appalachia, I grew up in Massachusetts, but like we've shown this film around the country, and there are people from Detroit who are like, I'm not from coal country, I'm from car country. Like, we are all from someplace, we all have rituals, we all have meaning and myth and stories that we tell. And like, for me, that is what's inspiring about this film, is that I feel like there's just universal truths in it. And I have to say, like, we were at Telluride last week, and we were watching an Alice Rohrwacher retrospective, and they showed clips of her films before they showed the film that she was premiering at Telluride. And this short comes on, and this short is like, JR basically collaborated with her, and they were in this Italian farmland, and basically they did a demonstration, which is a funeral, and they dug these masked giant graves with these giant JR art pieces, and they walked them into, and we literally were like, this is King Cole.
A funeral for farming.
It was a funeral for farming.
Yeah.
And it was so mind-blowing, because that film was done in 2020. And I texted Elaine afterwards, and I was like, have you heard of this film? It was clearly so inspired by it.
Yeah.
And she's like, no. And when she watched it, she was like, and so you realize the universal, just these stories live within all of us in some way, and we've really struggled genuinely showing the film. We're waiting for our international premiere. People feel like this film is a very American film, and we're sitting here like, is coal not anywhere else in the world? Are you kidding me? This is crazy, right? So it's interesting,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's definitely speaking to this kind of paradigm shift, I think as a culture, I mean, hopefully, we're kind of trying to make sense of the fact that you can have traditions and things that you were taught to have reverence for, and still you're not a bad, child of those traditions and that culture by wanting to move on and redefine things. I mean, I think that it made me think about a lot of even, other stories I've seen of even people, I don't know, it seems crazy and different, but making sense of abuse and the fact that, people who abused them might have been people they loved. And it's just not all one thing. I don't know. I'm just rambling now, but it's just really interesting to me. I think there are a lot of universal themes. I read a little bit about the sound design, which is so beautiful, and it was so cool to hear in a theater all around us, because it's just gorgeous. And I want everybody to know about the sound design. So can you tell us a little bit about that and the breath work and all of that? 'Cause it's so cool.
Sure. Yeah. Elaine met this guy at the Big Ears Film Festival in Tennessee, or she went to see a show, and he was doing this unbelievable sort of beatbox, and she just talked to him afterwards and said, we should stay in touch. And then we were making the film and trying to understand what the score and the soundscape would be like, and we knew early on that we didn't want it to be we didn't want it to be expected, so we weren't going to have a fiddle or string centric score. We wanted to show and bring out the percussive part of the region and the culture, and also soundscape was like so dynamic and so interesting and in such relation to humanity. I think it was important for Elaine to try something different too. So she met someone named Shodake Tenera. Is that yeah? And he does almost the entire like soundscape with his voice. So he does all of the winds and the crickets and the relationship between the sort of like the zoom ins for your ears and the zoom out. It's all done like with him in a microphone, and it's really
Isn't that
it's like
crazy?
absolutely
So cool.
yeah.
You go to our Instagram, you can like I think there's like little videos of him, and you can see like he'll come to a screening and he'll just like ask people to close their eyes, and then he'll do this whole thing, and you're like, what? This is like insane.
But it was this beautiful team. Our composer is named Bobak Lafatour. He did like The Green Knight, and he was used to like very big scores, but he brought it down to just these like beautiful like singing bowls and like other percussion instruments that he had in his studio. And then we worked with Alex, who was like also the sound designer of Everything Everywhere All at Once. And so we had this like dream sound team that like helped bring the immediacy of place like to the film, which I feel really deeply.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is, you know, they all have their own relationship to coal and coal mining and what the region is like. Yeah, so it was a beautiful process of making this film where everyone, and Elaine was an incredible leader in that, where everyone's influences and hopes and dreams kind of made their way into the film.
And our production sound mixer is this guy, Billy Raznick, who is just like a mad genius of putting mics in forests and letting them play overnight, and like built this library of sounds that are, you know, authentic and local to the region that really kind of helped inform just all of it, you know.
The last day of the sound mix, we were like joking with Elaine was on bird patrol to make sure that like every bird sound you heard in the entire film was from the region. that level of detail.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, you can feel the sound so much when you're watching it, and it feels kind of like haunted in a way that's just so beautiful. What can folks in this theater do to support King Cole going forward? What, you know, tell people about it? Where can they learn more?
I mean, we have an Instagram, King Cole. And, you know, tell your friends. And I mean, I think we're not in theaters here, but if you go to our website or the Instagram, it's like we're in like 50 spots around the country right now. Like, I mean, that's the amazing thing. It's like, we don't have a distributor, but we have an independent team, and we've, you know, Mia Bruno, who's our amazing distribution and marketing person, has, you know, really just stepped up. And also I think people just want to, you know, there are people around the country that actually do want to see the film. So
yeah, I think just we're in this self-distribution. 50 exhibitors have like almost all come to us to screen the film. So if there are theaters elsewhere that you know of, or we're also running a impact campaign, so we do need sort of like financial support for that, for the film. But more than anything, like the film lives in this, you know, we've premiered, I don't know what it is, like 8 months ago, like we're going to be trying to give the film a spotlight through different awards this season. And so like whether that's the, like, you know, our dream would be to be in the Spirit Awards or like other awards too. So helping just get the word out so that we can have a place, and this film can have a presence. Would be great.
Well, thank you so much for coming. This was really special.